Now, if you are a young man seeking advice in the dating and pickup scene, or if you're just somebody that's just generally getting into self-improvement, then you've probably heard about the 80-20 rule. It's a pretty popular rule within the entire self-help community, and it is mostly based off of something called the Pareto principle. The Pareto principle states that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of the consequences come from 20% of the causes. For example, the richest 20% of people in the world control 80% of the wealth, or something to that effect. Of course, this isn't really an actual rule or a universal law, it's just a general principle that can be applied in economics and mathematics and other such boring shite. But across self-help, the 80-20 rule or the 80-20 principle is pretty widely used to apply to anything that can be results or outcome oriented. Everything from business to finance to, in this case, dating. Which brings us to the subject of today's video, the 80-20 rule as described by the Manosphere, specifically the Red Pill, and how you can be really held back just generally in your life if you place stock in this faulty belief. As I've said in my videos on similar subjects before, for me, being a good self-improvement channel isn't just about giving good self-help advice, it's also about calling out the bad self-help advice, the toxic stuff, the stuff that just really doesn't work and that will hold you back. And that's why I'm talking about the 80-20 rule as described by the Red Pill today. So the Red Pill's description of what the 80-20 rule is in terms of dating is that 80% of women are only interested in the top 20% of men, but I am going to kind of steelman that a little bit more for the purposes of this video to make it look a little bit more fair and balanced, and I'm going to slightly alter that to say that 80% of women are primarily interested in only the top 20% of men. Because if the former description was true, then we would be dealing with an epidemic of cheating women, and we would have men roaming the streets with great harems trailing behind them. Now, firstly, it's important to point out that there are approximately 0 peer-reviewed, legitimate studies that demonstrate that this version of the 80-20 rule applies. There is no evidence that suggests that the majority of women are primarily interested in the top 20% of men. Now, this isn't to say that there are not studies on what women seem to generally find attractive in a biological sense, everything from symmetrical facial features, the right proportion of muscles, and even down to things like smell or pheromones. But we also know, because we're all adults here, that sexual attractiveness is not the end-all and be-all of relationships. Is it important? Yes. Is it the most important thing? I don't know, but is it the only thing? Certainly not. It's also not a secret to point out that the more physically attractive you are, the more easy you are going to find it generally to find a relationship. There are also other outliers like rock stars, celebrities, YouTubers who are pretty well known for having trails of people walking behind them just waiting to jump into bed with them at a moment's notice. And no, I'm not jealous, you are, but these are extremely anomalous individuals. They are far from the norm, and if you were to calculate them across the male population, and I'm specifically talking about the male population here, they wouldn't even reach close to 20%. It is an astronomically low amount of people who become famous rock stars, celebrities, YouTubers, things like that. And these kinds of outliers are generally ignored when it comes to looking at things statistically, because they are just that. They are outliers. They don't actually hold any kind of statistical weight most of the time, because they are so far outside of the norm that when it comes to the study of averages, they don't really apply. And I say all that to kind of summarize the point that there is no evidence to back up the idea that the 80-20 rule in terms of what the red pill is saying it is actually a thing. And yes, I know there's going to be loads of people saying that their experiences show them that it's true. Unfortunately, experiences and anecdotes are not evidence, or at least they're not statistically significant evidence. So come back when you have a study, I suppose. Because as always, just because I couldn't find evidence to support the claim that the 80-20 rule is real doesn't mean that there is no evidence out there. And also, as always, I am perfectly willing to be presented that data. If you have it, send it my way. But wait, Ben, you foolish cuck, you might be saying to yourself, what about the OK Cupid studies? Now, the OK Cupid studies, or rather the OK Cupid articles, are something that I see thrown around quite a lot as proof that the 80-20 rule is real. Sometimes the studies aren't alluded to directly. Sometimes people will just say that online dating proves that the 80-20 rule is a real thing. But it always kind of goes back to these original OK Cupid studies. For those of you who are not familiar, OK Cupid is an online dating website. I've got no idea if it's popular anymore. I kind of associate it with like very, very early online dating. So I've got no idea what the relevance is anymore. So for those of you who don't know, OK Cupid did a number of kind of analysis pieces in like 2009-ish, all about the data that they were collecting as it related to online dating on their platform. And since there is no other data except for this very, very old article, so old that OkCupid has actually either archived it or deleted it, to find this information I had to use the Wayback Machine. But in the absence of any other evidence, I will analyze this as proof for the 80-20 rule instead, and we'll see where we go from there. So in this blog article, we see a few interesting data points, and we're going to break it down point by point. So the first point is that 2/3 of men message the top third of women based on attractiveness. And what this shows is that men on OkCupid were generally more interested in the most attractive women on the site. And if I could think of a more clever term than the 66-33 rule, I would use it in this case, but it is a pretty interesting Pareto distribution anyway, and it pretty much goes along with what you would kind of intuitively think about online dating. Point number 2 was that women rate about 80% of men as less than medium attractiveness. And this is of course the bit that gets brought up because it's literally showing that at least on OkCupid, women rated 80% of the profiles on there as less than average attractiveness, which is to say they might not necessarily find them as physically attractive as another man. What's interesting is the very next point that they say, which is, in spite of the fact that women rate 80% of the men on OkCupid as less than average attractiveness, they still message them. That's right, the majority of women on OkCupid will still message a man that they think is less than average attractiveness. Now, if the 80-20 rule was really at play here, then what we would be seeing is that 80% of women would be contacting the top 20% of men, the men that they did rate as above average attractiveness. We are not seeing that. We do see that with men, where men will kind of overwhelmingly message women who are in the top third of attractiveness, but it's not the same with women, they seem to be pretty happy to contact the less attractive guys. This could suggest that there are alternative reasons that they are messaging them and that physical attractiveness isn't all there is. Maybe there was a pretty funny profile picture that they had. Maybe they wrote something interesting in their bio. Maybe there was something that they had in common. Or it could be really any other number of factors. We just don't really know what the factors are that are causing it, but what we do know is that as far as we can tell so far, the 80-20 rule isn't really panning out the way that it is kind of purported that it does in these studies. And point number 4 was that attractive guys get 11 times the amount of messages than the lowest rated men did, and that average looking guys get 4 times the amount of messages than the lowest rated men did. And the more attractive you are, the more likely you are to get a response to messages that you send out. And this is something that I'm sure comes as no surprise to anyone. The more physically attractive you are, once again, the easier you will find it to date people, just generally speaking. And whilst this data might not necessarily make you feel good if you are anyone except for Chris Hemsworth, it is far from a dating death sentence. Yes, women in this study generally rated most of the men as less than average attractiveness, but they messaged them anyway. So there's something else going on there. But what this does not show in any kind of categorical way is that 80% of women are only or even primarily interested in the top 20% of men. They seemed pretty happy to just message anyone anyway. So this really brings me to the crux of today's video, which is that the 80-20 rule is something that if you are believing in it, if you hold any stock in it, it is going to only hold you back. If you've been feeling hopeless in your dating life because you feel that women are only going to be interested in the top 20% of men, then you can start to feel a little bit of hope, because the only data out there that was supposed to support the 80-20 rule does not. In fact, it shows the exact opposite. Really, the only thing that supports notions like this and ideas like this is a person's internal biases or their own flawed intuition. If you find dating hard, then maybe you're more likely to believe that 80% of women are only interested in this small minority of men, and that the reason that you're not getting any dates is because you're just not in that top 20%. It's a much easier thing to believe than going through kind of rejection after rejection, which is the process of dating for literally everyone. Doesn't matter how attractive you are. And I get that. I truly do. I hate being rejected. I hate being ignored. I hate being ghosted as much as the next guy. And it does happen to me. I know that probably comes as a shock to a lot of people because obviously I'm a big old 10 out of 10. But yeah, I know it hurts. And I know it especially hurts when you can see other people that seem to have it going much easier for them than you do. But here is something that I want you to consider. Just because somebody has a natural aptitude towards something, just because somebody is kind of more naturally inclined towards confidence or more naturally good looking in a physical sense, this doesn't mean that you are out of the game. It doesn't mean that you should give up, and it certainly doesn't mean that you will always just be a second place prize at best. There is much more to dating than simply physical attractiveness or the amount of money in your wallet or the amount of car that you drive. Otherwise, we'd have perfect delineations of relationships. We'd have the 10s with the 10s, the 7s with the 7s, the 3s with the 3s. We would have, you know, those attractiveness groups kind of set out and segmented into even smaller groups, kind of with the right kind of income levels and educational levels. Like if it went exactly in this way, then yeah, we'd see those perfect delineations, but we don't. Looks also fade with age, but there's still plenty of people in their 40s, 50s and 60s and 70s and even older than that getting into new relationships every single year. There's obviously more going on there. And finally, Dating is not a zero-sum game. Just because somebody is better at it than you and they reach their goal of finding a relationship or meeting people easier than you do, it doesn't mean that you are losing, and it doesn't mean that there is less opportunity for you, because at the end of the day, the majority of people are only going to settle down with one person. There are still a massive amount of single people out there in the world, and the overwhelming majority of them are looking for a happy, healthy relationship, just like you. Giving in to negative beliefs such as the 80-20 rule, believing that you're just in the bottom 80% of men, so that's why you can't get a girlfriend, is a belief that is only going to cause you insecurity and pain, and it is a completely manufactured pain that only benefits the profit of the people who are trying to sell you the idea that if you follow my proven system of X, Y, and Z, then you will be a 20% man and you will have your pick of the women. It's not how it works. And more importantly, do you want somebody to be playing on your insecurities to line their own pockets? This is what self-help is about on the whole. Self-help isn't actually interested as an industry in helping you solve your problems. It's only interested in making money, and they do that by playing on your insecurities. If they can make you feel bad enough because you're not good looking enough, because you're not confident enough, because you don't have enough money, because you don't have a good enough car, then they can bleed you dry of the money that you have worked hard to earn. And what do you get at the end of it? An empty wallet and a mind full of insecurity and pain. Remember that self-improvement as an industry only stays profitable if it continues to make you feel like you are not good enough. And maybe my empathy and general disposition of unconditional positive regard towards people makes me a beta SJW, but wouldn't you rather live in my worldview, where I believe dating is a numbers game? If you go out there and you meet enough people, you will find somebody who you enjoy being with, somebody that you can create a great relationship with. Wouldn't you rather believe that and then go out and try and achieve that, rather than thinking to yourself that you'll never be good enough because you're not a 20% man yet, because you haven't reached some fitness level or some financial level, or you don't have the right type of car or the big enough house or whatever it is that people are lying to you about you needing? I want to finish up this video by saying that one of the main missions of my channel is empowering people, because when you feel empowered, you feel confident, and when you feel confident, you can conquer the world, or at least you feel like you can conquer the world, and you can actually go out there and try and maybe even succeed. Ask yourself, does the 80-20 rule make you feel empowered? Is it realism, or is it just being a cynical asshole about the world? These kinds of beliefs will just hold you back. So reject them. Reject the 80-20 rule, reject the red pill, reject people that tell you that you're not good enough because you haven't done X, Y, and Z. You are good enough. And it's time you started to believe that. Live on your own terms, not on the terms that some self-help guru has told you about over the internet, because misery loves company. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. Let me know your thoughts and questions in the comment section down below. I know that a lot of people don't make it this far in the video, so if you have done, let me know what you thought in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel if this is the kind of stuff that you are looking for. Like the video, follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all the other stuff. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video very soon.